Russell, the news director, loves me. He truly loves me because he understands what makes me tick. What makes me tick today is a little novelty. It is not a novelty in the time it was issued. It was a very bit of serious business in Zimbabwe when it came out. And that's the $10 billion note, the $10 billion Zimbabwean dollar, printed in one of the fine printing houses in Europe with security details and fine ink work and engravings showing 3 rocks, 2 piled on top of the other, $10 billion from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. The inflation got so bad in the millions of percent before the collapse that banknotes were sent back to Europe and overprinted. They didn't have time to have new paper supplies. They just printed over the old ones, adding zeros and expanding the money supply, right? That's what happens when you have a fiat money economy. You don't ever have enough money, and the more inflation you have, the less money you seem to have. Everybody starts getting short on money. Money is flooding the economy. So-called money is flooding your economy, and you just don't have enough of it. And so you have a hyperinflationary blow-off, and that is to say there's so much money in the economy that there is no money in the economy, and that of course is a collapse. It happens every time there is a central bank and there is a central national government of a modern democratic welfare warfare state, right? The kind we have here in Tennessee, the kind we have in Washington. Every time, without exception, there is this phenomenon, the shortage of money because of the overprinting, the overproduction of the monetary unit, whether it's digital or whether it's on paper. We're in that kind of circumstance right now. And because we are in a bubble, we are in the third bubble that has happened in the last 20 years. And each one seems to have built off of the ones before. And the 2008 crash was just a blip in the overall gain, the overall rise in the number of dollars, so-called, that have been created and which are traded effectively, made means of accounting for obligations and promises to pay, guarantees of insurance contracts, all in dollars, all given a value of some kind, probably valuation more than they really are. And so you have a system of confidence where everybody's kind of betting for everybody else or against everybody else. And you have a gigantic pile of dollars, so-called dollars. Actually, they're Federal Reserve units. They're not. A dollar is something that I have in my pocket, right? It is a coin, and I usually carry around 3 of them. And when I go to the Lowe's, as I did yesterday, to buy a little stripper for wallpaper, so I made a stop there, and I always pay with cash and rarely write checks. I don't use a credit card. And in my hand sometimes, as I get out my change to make change or to receive it, I hold these dollars in my hand. Sometimes the clerk is a thinking person, usually not, but sometimes that young woman is, and I'll say, well, these are dollars, and then I ask, which would you rather have? Would you rather have this dollar here, which says $1, and it's a Morgan dollar, or would you rather have this one here that is official, right? It's on paper, and it says 1. And call, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
You know I love you.
You are breaking up on me. Start over.
You're almost there. I'm going to correct you a little bit. What you're holding in your hand is not a dollar. The hand has never touched me. The eye ever seen a dollar. It's no.
Go ahead.
A dollar is a monetary unit of measurement. What you're holding is a dollar.
What you're saying is it's like holding a gallon. No one can hold a gallon in one's hand. You can only hold a gallon of something, right? We have lost that call. Sorry. So I'm being corrected. I'm not actually holding. If I have a Morgan dollar in my hand, it's not an actual dollar. It is a coin. It is a coin that is weighed out at a dollar. The term dollar implying the fineness of the metal and the weight of the precious metal. In the end, what matters is the precious metal that's in that coin, not the slag and other cheap cheap hardeners that are part of the assembly of that unit, which is a unit of value, right? A unit of value, which is a dollar coin. Now we have. Okay, I hope you're on a better line, Colin. What's on your mind?
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's a dollar quantity of silver. And here's where we get confused, like the British pound. And you got it it's a unit of measurement. And if we believe the silver piece is a dollar, then Congress can declare anything a dollar. A dollar is a weight. It's 371 and a quarter grains of fine silver, 99.9% fine. It was based on the Spanish mill dollar, which was about the same weight, based on a coin called the Thaler from a town called Fowler. So it's a monetary unit of measurement. The hand has never touched, nor the eye ever seen a dollar. It's a weight. So you can't have paper dollars or silver dollars. That's important to know that, because most people don't. And that's why we're being robbed by 3% a year of inflation, at least 3 to 5%.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Right, we are being robbed by inflation. And as I was telling a friend yesterday, if you liquidate your shares or some part of your shares, you have the problem of having your savings, your investment capital in a bank, in his case, BOA, Bank of America, and then you're the victim of inflation, because there you're getting a return on your deposit, which is under 1%, and inflation is probably 2%, probably more like 5 or 6 or 7%, depending on the market in which you're making that measurement, because we're facing a steady erosion of our dollars. And because we have what is the effective equivalent of the $10 billion Zimbabwe note, we have notes that don't reduce their value quite that much, but it is in principle the same thing and faces the same destiny as the paper issue of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. And we have, as I said, we're in a bubble. The first one was the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, 2000. The second one was the housing bubble, and now we are in, if we look at asset prices versus gross domestic product, we are in what Charles Hugh Smith calls the central bankers bubble. I'm holding up a graphic here. If you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube, live on Nooga Radio on Facebook and on YouTube, just notice that there's the main line is a pretty steady gain in inflationary non-asset. Well, I'm not sure about the nature of those of that accounting, but it's a general rise, and the bubbles have been rising on top of these growth into gross domestic product. And the problem that we have with our economic system, which tax breaks and tax laws play around with, but really don't help, is that we have too much debt in the system, and we have not had a liquidation or a burning down of all the deadwood in the economy. In an essay that I want to make mention of here by Charles Hugh Smith, there's the headline of 3 bubbles or strikes and you're out. 3 strikes and you're out. 3 bubbles and you're out. There can't be a 4th bubble. We are in a mass reflation after the 2008 meltdown. He says radical new central bank policies work wonders in the initial boost phase. And it has kind of an S. The initial boost phase is an ignition. The boost phase is where we are now. We're kind of near the top of it, because the sums being deployed are so large and the policy is so extreme. Quantitative easing, as it's called, purchase of assets by central banks, for example. Never before have central banks conjured up billions of dollars, yuans, yens, and euros out of thin air and used this new currency to do what? Buy bonds, stock, and debt instruments in vast quantities for 8 years running. In other words, the central banks own many of the shares. The shares are held up in value and not sold because they've been purchased by banks that have made from nothing, right? Ex nihilo, they have made the yuans or the yens or the euros and then made purchases in the paper markets of these assets. But over time, the novelty and effectiveness of the radical policies wear off, and that's where we are now. Participants habituate to the policies, he says, which become a given that cannot be removed without disrupting the markets. And that's why Grandma Yellen is so tender and hesitant about saying, well, we're going to raise interest rates. Central banks suppress volatility. He says everybody knows that. Central banks jump in and buy every dip, stopping any decline in its tracks with unlimited buying of assets. But eventually, he says, everyone is on the same side of every trade. At that point, there is only one movement left, a reversal. that catches everybody by surprise. He says the third dynamic is that central banks are visibly getting nervous about the unintended and unpredictable consequences of their extreme policies, that being namely the artificial suppression of the rate of interest. It's all fun and games when central banks are buying trillions of assets with money created out of thin air, but how do you stop the asset purchases when everyone depends on them as the foundation of the markets? Go to LouRockwell.com and read David Stockman. He's had some of his private posts going public on LouRockwell.com. He's a very good analyst, and I do suggest you read David Stockman with care. Okay, read him with care. The essay prior to the one out today, I think, might be particularly useful to you, my listener. Are there no consequences from holding interest rates near zero for 8 long years? Smith asks. What about political blowback from the rising wealth inequality that central banks have fueled? Policy extremes trigger unintended consequences as a result of being extreme. You can't throw around trillions and not generate expectations, incentives, and blowback from those who don't benefit from the extreme policies. He says, once markets grasp that central banks have lost their control of the consequences of their policies, confidence, faith, and trust in central banks saving the day will evaporate. Of course, when people realize that, there'll be the stampede to the exits in the markets. The likely result of this realization is that markets will plummet to new lows rather than reach new highs. 3 bubbles or 3 strikes and you're out. Those betting on a 4th bubble of even greater extremes will find their time at bat has come to an end. And this is a view that you're not going to get really anywhere except in the free market libertarian press. I wanted to mention that regarding the homeless veteran organization, Volunteers of America, there is a way you can make a donation yourself if you'd like to. This is a charity that receives most of its money for payroll from the Department of Labor, but you can go to voamid.org. That's voamid.org. VOA Mid-States is what that refers to. The Volunteers of America, covering 16 counties. If you'd like to make a donation, you can do that on the website, voamid.com. Now, just wanted to mention also here, David Tulis, thanks for joining us. We're the all-new Nooga Radio 92.7 and 95.3 HD4. That's high definition channel 4. Go to Nooganomics.com today, our chief sponsor, and I have a story there about Chris Davis. He is in Morgan County Correctional Complex in the middle part of the state. And I did not receive, this is a letter that I had sent to the Department of Correction demanding effectively a response about an abuse of this state slave, right? We're all need to understand that slavery is practiced in Tennessee by the state itself. The state itself is the slave master. 20 million people are in its custody and care. And the victims of the crimes for which they are in the prison are ignored and neglected. There is no restitution, no effort of making any kind of restitution among or to or for the victims of crime. Now, Chris Davis is number 398102 in Morgan County, and I sent copies to Nasa Taylor, the spokeswoman, as well as summarize his arguments. He files grievances that have been labeled as inappropriate. No reason was given for their return without the grievances being addressed. He says, although the issues described therein are completely relevant and grievable, and he makes a reference to TDOC policy violations and ACA standards violations that everyone in protective custody is forced to endure. He mentions Corporal Monkhouse as allowing an inmate to divulge proof of his confidential informant status to the entire inmate population, which of course puts him in he says drastically places his life in danger. He says that is the true reason why grievance number 3 was returned unprocessed, because to do otherwise would prove the grievance chairperson responsible for placing my life in danger with his negligence. And then he mentions a sexual attack. Homosexual rape is a grave problem in prison. It is, of course, the state prison system is a school for crime. It is also a school for Muslim extremism, about which we really don't hear a great deal, but I'm assured by one of my three correspondents, that Muslim extremism is nurtured carefully, albeit quietly, in the state prison system. He said, Chris Davis says, I'm also currently being subjected to a PREA violation, a Prison Rape Elimination Act violation, in which an inmate made sexual advances toward me on November 12 and is still in this pod. I have already given a statement on the aforementioned date, but the officials failed to transfer the aggressor, which is highly illegal. If I ever receive a grievance back on this matter, I will be sure, he says to me, to mail you a copy along with other proof of wrongdoing. So that is at Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor, Nooganomics.com. And I wanted to mention that I'm working on the Talking While Black case here in Chattanooga, which is a routine arrest, right? And the fact that we have an arrest of two innocent people who've done nothing wrong except talk to an officer so that he can hear them standing on the sidewalk as he is making an arrest. He's making an arrest of three young men in a car without Mirandizing them, which violates the policy of the department. And then the officer, E. Buckman, arrests Cameron Williams, Grimy Williams, who is a hip-hop singer in Chattanooga, and his girlfriend, Nikki Lewis. She is involved in the Glass the Glass Street Art Cooperative, which is in Chattanooga, seeking to do good work in the direction of art and creativity and bringing new life, a bit of cultural vigor to a down and out part of Chattanooga. The arrest is March 25, and you may have had a chance to hear from Cameron Williams. And I'm trying to figure out where this story has its evil. Right, there's an evil occurrence against Nikki Lewis by an officer, and what's evil about it is that it's so routine. It's just a routine arrest and a throwaway charge, which was negotiated down, I think, on account of both of these individuals. And why? How did they get in trouble? Well, they simply said to the officer, "You can't demand IDs of people in the back of a car." For a car that was stopped for a tag light that was out, right, and the tag one day expired. There's no requirement that anybody give their ID if they're in the back of a car, a passenger, or sitting in the back seat of a car. There's no requirement that they give any kind of ID, and yet the officer demands it of the young men who obediently comply with him. And the comments from Cameron Williams on the side of the street are, they don't have to give you that. They don't have. So here he's meddling, but meddling is not a crime. Talking to an officer is not a crime. They were not impeding him in any way. Nothing that they did met the requirements in Title 39-17-305, which is the disorderly conduct statute. You can read the statute and watch the video at some point. This is the video is being redacted, I think, obtained under open records request from the police department. And nothing that the woman said prompted her to be arrested. Nothing that the man said, the hip-hop singer, justified his arrest. She was gassed. She was given pepper spray in the face, which is an extraordinarily painful and staggering thing to happen on a routine matter, because they wouldn't stop talking to the cop. They were not interrupting what he's doing. They were not doing anything that was unreasonable. They did not unreasonably make unreasonable noise to prevent others from carrying on lawful activities. They didn't do that, which is one of the provisions in the statute. They did not even meet the vague provision of that statute that says you're responsible if you create a hazardous or physically offensive condition by any act that serves no legitimate purpose. Clearly unconstitutionally vague language there, but they didn't even meet that. And was there a hazard, fire, or other emergency taking place? No. And therefore, the authority under the statute to make for an order for dispersal doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. And they were not engaging in fighting or in violent or threatening behavior. And yet the officer charged them. And what really angers me about Mayor Andy Burke allowing these kinds of things to happen, the officer exercises a proprietary, managerial, and summary authority over citizens who have constitutionally guaranteed rights. He doesn't even deign to read them the Miranda rights. He doesn't even tell them about that. He just abruptly, as if he owned them, right? As if the officer owned the citizen puts them under arrest just because he's talking, just because the man on the street is talking about the officer doing his work. The officer is not operating in private. He has no expectation of privacy. What he's doing is subject to narration. What if I were there? If I were there, I would have said something just like that. I'd say, guys, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Is that interfering? That's not interfering. That is not a crime. That is simply not a crime. And Mayor Andy Burke, allows this. He allows the rejection of the policy of his own department for Miranda. That's point one. And then point two seems to be the proprietary and ownership type claims made by the officer against two citizens here in Chattanooga. One with a spicy tongue. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 90.